people come to a point that they can't lie anymore. They've lied so long, their health is falling apart, their relationships are falling apart, and they've tried so hard to make life work by drinking, drugging, sex, whatever, you know, food, gambling, whatever it may be, and they come to a point that they talk about hitting bottom. I want y'all to talk about what that moment was like for you when you came to the end of your addiction and said, I can't do this anymore. You avoided it as long, for years, decades, but you came to a point that you said, I have got to get help. What was that like for you?
It's very lonesome. It's very hollow. It's a feeling unlike I never had before, where I looked around and there was nothing there in my life but despair.
Alan, what had you been doing?
When I came to that crossroads in my life, I had been actively using alcohol and cocaine for several years, and there was a series of things that happened for me. One of the biggest moments of clarity for me was I was purchasing cocaine in the neighborhood, and my son, my ex-wife and my son still lived in that neighborhood, and I saw him and he looked and he was with his friends, and I could see the look on his face, and it just read, please don't say nothing to me.
You were walking down the street?
And you know, it just saved it an embarrassment, and when I passed him, you know, the friends say, man, look at that crackhead, you know, and you know, something went all through me, and I tried to feel what he must have felt that time, but the addiction was so strong, I just closed the crack in my hand and kept walking. But that was a moment of clarity where I say, you know, Alan, you need to do something. Because at this time, when I looked in the mirror at myself, you know, I could only look at my forehead, my nose, and my chin. My two eyes never made contact with each other, just because of what I had become, how my family viewed me, the expectations that they had for me. You know, the last time I seen my dad, I was at a barbershop, and I walked in with him to tell him that I've lost my apartment. You know, can you give me some money? And he had the barber spin around in the chair. I said, I'm almost under the bridge. And he said, well, son, when you get under the bridge, you give me a call from there, where there's no phones under the Pierce elevator. You know, and he was cutting me off. So those type of things is what made me come to the conclusion that maybe you do need some help. Besides the fact that each time I got paid, I said I wasn't going to use, or I'll tell my ex-wife to come get some money, meet me there at 4:30, and she got there at 5 o'clock. I was peeping out the blinds at her and couldn't move, just stuck. So those type of things, and you know, it worked out.
I think a lot of us have moments that are preparing us for the moment when we decide to go to a meeting or go to treatment. I was intervened on. I mean, I never got to that place. I was so well defended. But I think that there were moments like John. I had read Out of the Shadows, and I knew it was about me, but I put it back on my shelf. And I think the greatest moment of clarity for me, though, which happened about a month before I got intervened on, was when Debbie got really sick. And you know, she had a TIA one day, and just seeing her. And
What's a TIA?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a transient ischemic attack. It's like a mini stroke, and she was paralyzed on her right side for a few hours and had to go. Well, why don't you tell that story?
Well, at this time, I didn't know all the information of your acting out, but what I know today is that I believe my body knew what was going on, even though intellectually I didn't. And I did suffer this TIA, and I went totally paralyzed on the right side of my body. And you know, no one could really find any reason for that to be so in my life. But it was, I think, a preparation for us when 1 month later the truth did come out, and finally I was able to match up some of that reality in my own life, all the physical symptoms that were happening, and then to finally put it to the reality of what Mark had been doing.
But I think for me it was a visible sign of what I had been doing to her all this time. I mean, even in my spirit I knew it somehow then, that this paralysis was you know, somehow the result of all this stuff that I had been doing, even though she didn't know about it. Her body was telling her. And that was just a moment of preparation so that when I was intervened on, I didn't fight it.
Tell us about the intervention.
Well, you know, it was. I call it an intervention. I think it was more a firing. You know, it was. It was 8 very angry people with me, going around the circle, telling me that they knew about my behavior. They were disappointed. They felt betrayed. You know, I was, you know, an awful person. But there was a recovering alcoholic that they'd included in this at the very last minute, I think by the grace of God. And he stood up at one very, very important moment, and he came over to my chair and he basically said to me, and this was really the intervention, he said, your sins with sex are no different than mine with alcohol. And as I fell into his arms, he said, if you trust me, I'll find you some help. And he knew just enough where to call. He found Pat Carnes' program up in Minneapolis and made sure I got there. And, you know, I owe my life to AA, even though I'm not myself a recovering alcoholic. If it hadn't been for an alcoholic, you know, I never would have got to the place where I really found help.